Hi there, in this video I'm going to take some pictures of birds from my bird hide, but then I'm going to explain how I edit them in the computer. So this video is going to have two parts. In part one, I'm going to go into the bird hide over there. I'm going to take some pictures of the birds and I'm going to talk you through the settings that I'm using and I'll see what I get. Then I'm going to take the pictures and I'm going to put them into the computer in part two and I'm going to talk you through my editing process. I'm really looking forward to making this video and hopefully help you to enjoy your photography. If you've been a subscriber for a while, you will have seen me do some videos from in here before, but if you're new to the channel, you won't realise that this is an old shed that I've converted into a bird hide. Now you can see just here, there are some holes that I've poked through that I can stick the camera through, put it on a shelf, and it makes a great platform for taking pictures of the birds in the garden. So since I last filmed a video from inside the hide, I've done quite a few changes to the perches outside. It's really important to keep updating your perches and change them, otherwise your pictures get very samey. But we've recently cut down some trees, and so I've used some of the more interesting bits of wood and branches to just change the way that everything looks out there, because things were getting a bit stale. This is a new addition to my perch setup. It's the bottom part of a tree. We cut the top off, cut the bottom level, and I've put a stand on the bottom so it's freestanding, but I can also move it about if I want to change its position. But what I particularly liked about this tree stump is it's got this hole here that I can use for dropping seed into, so if I can get a bird just coming out of this hole, it might frame it quite nicely. I've also drilled some holes into the side, on either side, so I can get the woodpecker getting suet pellets out of the holes, and that will make it quite interesting because it's quite gnarly and old. Later on in the video, I'm going to show you what I do with my images when I get them back in the computer. Now on the whole, I tend to do very little to my nature images in the computer. It's a kind of holdover from when I used to enter nature competitions, because the rules there say that you are very, very limited to the tweaks you can make. Certainly things like cloning and altering the reality of the picture are completely a no-no for nature shots. Now if you're just using them for your own personal benefit, or if you're putting them on the internet and they're not in a competition, then it's fair game, you can do whatever you like. But I still try and stick with the reality of nature shots. I save all the photoshopping for other things. If you're enjoying this video, don't forget to click like, subscribe and the bell notifications. That way you'll be kept up to date with all of my future content, and it really helps the channel to grow. One of the things to consider is whether you use JPEG format or RAW format to record your pictures. Now if you use a JPEG format, it's got the benefit of being very quick because you can use the pictures straight out the camera, but you won't get quite as good quality, and the camera will make quite a few decisions about how it changes the image. Now if you choose RAW format though, you can't use the images straight out of the camera. You've got to do some work in the computer, but you've got more detail, you've got more flexibility to alter levels, and it's really, really powerful what you can do with it. And I'll show you more about that later in the video. Well, that's a first. I've never seen a moorhen out here in the back paddock. from the bird hide. I have seen one before when I've been down at the kingfisher hide on the pond, which is not very far away, but not out here, so that's a bit of a treat. I've just had a redpoll visit. Now that's the first one I've seen for about 5 years. I didn't get a particularly spectacular picture. I did get one of it on the feeder. It just didn't go over onto one of the perches, but it's nice to see that it's coming back. So I've come inside onto my computer, and what I'm going to do is several edits to show you some basic things and then some more advanced things. I'm also going to talk about the differences that I might do if I'm preparing an image for printing or preparing an image ready for putting onto YouTube. What I've done is I've opened up the raw file of this great tit in Camera Raw. Now Camera Raw is a conversion bit of software that comes with Photoshop. It's not the only way of converting raw files, but as I said earlier on in the hide, you can't actually use a raw file straight away. You've got to do a little bit of conversion, but it's where you get a lot of benefits because you can do things to the image to improve it before you start to use it. So I'll go through those now. So you might be able to see from this great tit that the area just here, the white bit, because the sunlight was very bright, the camera hasn't done a particularly good job of exposure. So if I open these basic conversions here, one of the sliders has to do with highlights, and very quickly you can recover all of the detail there from the highlights just by sliding that down. If I zoom in a little bit closer, you can see now that the highlights are coming back. Instead of being blown out like they were before, we've got lots of detail there now in that white spot on the bird. So that's great. What I can also do underneath the bird, again because the sunlight was very bright, I can lift the shadow detail and bring some of the detail back in those shadows. Much better exposure than I had before, and that detail was all there in the raw file, and you might have lost that if there was a JPEG version. What I would do next is I would just, let's go in a little bit closer again. We've got nice detail here, but when you take a picture in RAW, it doesn't add any sharpening. When you take a JPEG image, the camera adds some sharpening, and people don't realize that always. So I'm going to just add a little bit of sharpening again. This is just something that you can do in Camera Raw. There's no hard and fast rule about how much to add. I usually go somewhere halfway, which is about 90 to 85. But what you might be able to tell, just if you look here, you can see some noise. Even though I'd got only an ISO of 400, it's still not completely noise free when you go in quite close. So I'm going to add a little bit of noise reduction as well until that becomes nice and flat and you can't see that. So zooming out you couldn't see it anyway, but when you zoom in you can see it. So that just really cleans up that image. Now if we go back to the main basic panel again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just add a little bit of texture and a little bit of clarity, because that just brings out even more detail from the images. And again, that's just down to personal preference. Some people wouldn't do that at all. I just think it just really makes the image pop. So finally, what I'm going to do, I did say earlier on that I would just show you how I might do this for printing. Now this picture of the blue tit here is not framed particularly well, but I wasn't bothered about that when I took the image, because I knew that I could sort it out afterwards. So I'm going to add a crop. Now for this particular bird, I'd probably add a square crop. Now just to make sure that I get a perfect square, just over here in the aspect ratio, I can select a 1:1 aspect ratio, which gives me a perfect square. So I'll align the bird within that square crop and apply that. Let's zoom back in again, just so we can see all of that. There we go, so there's our square crop. And the final thing I would probably do is down in the effects, I'm just going to add a very subtle vignette. Right, if you go too far, you can see the edges, and that's just overcooked it. But if I go in a little bit, so the vignette's not particularly evident, it just focuses the viewer on the bird itself. With this image, what I'm going to do is I'm going to prepare it for YouTube. Now, because YouTube has a widescreen format, what I like to do is show the images full screen if I possibly can. There have been occasions when I think to crop the image in, and I think that works better to show how I would present it properly. But if I can show it widescreen, I like to. So I've done all the tweaks that I needed. This image doesn't need any exposure corrections. I've just added a bit of sharpness and a bit of texture. So if I click open, it will open up into Photoshop. There we go. So this is now in Photoshop. What I will do then is I will make a new image that's scaled to 1920 by 1080, which is the YouTube format that I use. And I'm just going to fill that with black. Once I've done this, if I'm doing a lot of images, I can then use this file and save it, and it always saves to the same location. What I'll do is I'll go back to this picture of the bird, and I'm just going to drag it over onto that image that I've just created. It's come out very big, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to scale it down. Now I'm going to just move it around and rescale it till I'm happy with the size of it, so it would look good full screen on YouTube, and I think there is probably about right. Now what you will notice is in the right hand corner over there, if I go back up again, in the right hand corner over there, there's a bright spot which I'm not very happy with. So there's a very easy way of sorting that out. I'm just going to choose the brush tool, and I'm going to sample one of these green colours just here, and let's just put a new layer. I always like working in new layers if I can, but I'm just going to brush a little bit of that green into that corner, and that's that sorted, that's that highlight gone. And you can see the difference if I click on. It makes a big difference if I turn that layer on and off with that highlight that's very distracting. Take it away, and that's literally just brushed a little bit of green into that corner. So I've opened this picture of a blue tit, and what I'm going to do is show you a different technique for preparing an image for YouTube. So firstly, I'm going to drag it over onto the document that I set up earlier, which is the widescreen format. And let's zoom out so I can get the transform tools up. To do that, you press Ctrl T, that brings up the transform tools, and I'm just going to shrink it down to about the right size that I want. And I'm going to think about the composition. Even though it's a widescreen in YouTube, I still want the image to look good, and that is I feel that's a good place for that bird to be in the image. But there is still a problem with the edge. Over on the left hand edge here, there's a black spot, and down in the right hand corner here, there is a branch protruding. So let's deal with the left hand edge first. It's quite simple to do. What I'm going to do is make a selection here using the rectangular marquee tool. I'm going to do a copy and paste, which copies that area onto a new layer. Bring up the selection tools again, and then just drag that out to the left hand edge of the screen. And because the right hand edge hasn't moved at all, it's completely invisible. You don't see the join there. So that's that done. Then we're just going to sort out this area here where this branch is coming in. Now there's loads of ways of doing this. Sometimes you can do a content aware fill, but when I tried this, it just leaves a little bit of green. So the best way of doing this that I found for this particular image, I'm just going to use a clone tool. Because the area around here is fairly similar, I'm going to select that as my area to clone from and just paint that out, and that's it. That's that blue tit image ready for YouTube. So there were a few simple edits. Hope you found those useful. I'm going to hand back to myself outside. I hope you found that video enjoyable and useful. A particular highlight for me was seeing that red poll on the moorhen this morning. That was really special. But I also hope that me talking through my editing process has given you an insight on what it takes to get the pictures from the camera up onto the screen. If you've got any questions, I'd love to be able to try and answer them. Drop them below in the comments or head over to my Instagram, that's @TheOakdenPhotography. There you can leave your comments, but you'll also be able to see lots of my images and some that you won't see in videos. You can also do me a really big favour by clicking like, subscribe and the bell notifications. YouTube loves that kind of thing and it also really helps the channel. Watch out for next week's video. That goes live at 4 o'clock on Sunday, but all that's left now is to say stay safe and I'll see you soon. I've not seen a moorhen out there. I want to change your position. More about the benefits. You'll get slush. There you can leave me. Oh, nearly.